We're going to kick off here, folks.
Well, it is.
Good evening and welcome. The time is 6 p.m. and I would like to call to order the January 8th, 2020 Keizer Planning Commission meeting. City Recorder has noted the attendance. First order of business is the approval of minutes. The consideration and approval of minutes for the November 13th, 2019 commission meeting sent on December 31st. Do we have a motion on the minutes?
Move.
Second.
There's a motion by Commissioner Whalen and second by Commissioner Keizer to approve as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Same, opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Debbie, as always. Do we have any appearance of interested citizens? So many people in the audience tonight. Okay, moving on. So the next order of business is to discuss the 2020 work plan. As with before, let's just hear what the staff has to say. If we've got any questions, we can talk about them afterwards, unless you want to invite questions during the process. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Brown, Mr. Witham, and Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Lawyer. So we have the work plan in front of you guys, and I would say if you have questions on the items as we kind of walk through, just jump in and ask them, otherwise I'll forget. It might be easier for me. So let's just we'll go as we go. So through the list, they're not in any particular prioritized order, but they were items that staff identified that we think are what we're going to be spending most of our time working on. For those of you that have been commissioners for a while, you also know that our lists tend to change throughout the year and items get slid up because there's things that happen at the legislature or with city council or with people that make something a priority that we didn't see coming. So obviously, it's not a set in stone list, but it is at least give us some guidance as to what we'll be working toward in the next 12 months. And one of the things I wanted to kind of put out there at the forefront is if there are items that are near and dear to your hearts or things that you think we are missing out on, this is absolutely the time that we want to have you bring those out and discuss, and by consensus at least incorporate that in so that we can know as we want to move forward over the next year.
And just so you know, what I plan to do with this list is also share it with the council so they see what priorities have been established here and invite them, if they know of something that they have on their minds, we would invite their input as well.
Were any of these added at the direction or request of council? Anything that's on here right now?
No, I don't believe so. We didn't have anything that the council said, oh, and by the way, make sure this goes on your list.
Okay.
These are kind of things, as you have looked at it since you've had it, they're kind of stuff that evolves and presents itself as we go along, kind of thing. So.
Okay.
Nate, the council goals we have behind us here, short and long term, are those last year's? Or those?
Yeah, that's last year's.
Okay.
In fact,
Coming up next Monday.
next Monday, they're going to take up their goals again.
So I'll hold my question until we dive into the list.
All right. Well, if we're ready, we'll just kind of dive in. The first one on the list talks about the legislative rezone of the UT properties. You know, some months ago, for a few months, we had meetings on the UT text amendment. One of the things that came out of that was the direction from Planning Commission to staff that, yes, let's go ahead and take up pushing that forward as time permits and priority makes sense to do that. So it's remained on the list. It's a holdover from last year's list, frankly. Pretty straightforward. And Nate and I talked a little bit. We're kind of thinking about bringing that in the spring. We think we have enough time to get proper notice out, things like that. So that's kind of what we're thinking about at this point. The second one on the list is one that's been on the list for like 4 years or maybe 5. And that is storm drainage standards. Because of our stormwater division and NPDES permit and the MS4 permit and a lot of other permits that I don't actually know what they stand for. I just know there's letters around them. There are some state mandated requirements for reporting and permitting, and we've had conversations with the Environmental Division for the last several years about the fact that the code needs to be updated to either reflect those or reference those in a way that makes sense so that developers aren't blindsided when they come in to do a project. Mr. Grants could probably speak to some things that have been surprises over the years, although now they kind of know what all those things are at his place. So that's why that's on the list. The hard part about one for timing is it's not something we're driving because we don't have the information. We've had some turnover in staff in the Environmental Division, and so before I took it off the list, because I was just going to strike it for this year, I had to sit down with the environmental folks, and they are looking forward to having the opportunity to try to get into that and are cautiously optimistic that we might be able to get that accomplished this year. So it's probably going to be later in the year at this point, but that's why we're keeping that one on the list for now. Section 2.302, the next one, which says street standards, possibly definitions. This is a text amendment to clarify the number of dwelling units allowed to be served on an access easement. This we're going to be bringing to you next month. I actually just put the LCD notice in yesterday. We feel that it's an important one to move forward and talk about. I believe that based on the work we've recently done in the River Cherry Overlay District, as well as the state statutes of House Bill 2001, and prior to that, the ADU standards that were created where we have to allow ADUs everywhere in the city. One of the things in our code currently, the way language reads, there's some issues with calling it just simply dwelling units and not clarifying the difference between a single family dwelling or an ADU or this or that or the other thing. So we want to put some clarity to that for developers, property owners, fire districts, us, all of that. Nate?
And we've actually faced this question already, and we have actually, by interpretation, we have said that the accessory dwelling unit is not the standard, does not meet that threshold of residential units on a private access easement. So, but we have done that by interpretation, and we intend to make sure this is absolutely clear as to how this is going to go forward from here.
If there's no questions, and if there is, next month's meeting. So the next one on the list is a new master plan for Area D. That is imminent. We expected it would have already been applied for the jug handle portion, the interior portion. I know there's been work being done on civils for things and trying to figure things out. We expect that to come in any day. Because it's a master plan application, it's going to start its life with you all. So once we have it, we will be scheduling it and getting it to you, and basically it will kind of take priority over whatever we have queued up when it comes in to keep in pace with our land use processes. But so just to be aware, they are actually, knock on some wood somewhere, but it sounds like something's going to happen out there. They did have a groundbreaking.
So they've got fence up all around it.
Right.
Excavators
Right.
for 2 weeks that I could have used several times.
Hey, maybe the keys are in it, Mark.
And so our understanding is that they're simply doing groundwork only. We have not received any sort of permit application or anything. So groundbreaking is, I think, a loose term.
Well, as long as it's not more than 2,000 square feet, they don't need an erosion permit.
That erosion permit will be coming, I guarantee you that. They got plans. I tried to extract as much information from both tribes as much as possible, but it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, we understand that completely.
Yeah, for sure. So it's, Shane and I, we talked about this when we first met. We all got to put food on the table, but yet we're not out of our cars yet. So it's a business move.
Okay, so the next couple on the list are, we're kind of look at those as really pretty minor housekeeping ones. The one for fences, walls, and hedges. That was kind of actually identified. One of the things I do with the work plan each year is I talk to our staff and try to find out, hey, has there been some things that have come up this last year where there's been ambiguity or confusion or frustration with folks that seem to come up? And this one with fences comes up all the time, and that's the front yard fences. Our code doesn't allow anything over 3.5 feet, regardless of whether or not it's see-through. They do not sell 3.5-foot chain link, so people are always stuck with either illegally erecting a 4-foot tall chain link fence, which happens a lot, and then we could have to enforce against them. And so as we kind of kick that around the table, somebody in the office, I don't know if it was Megan or Ben, but one of them had identified, why don't we just allow 4-foot fences but require something that lets them be see-through so it doesn't cause the vision problem? And we all thought that seems reasonable to us. Let's take it to planning commission, see if it's reasonable to them. So
All for 6 inches.
yes, sir. And there may be some other things as well, because over the years, well, there are for sure some other things that are bookkeeping things, because the building code has also changed for commercial stuff that doesn't require any permits for fences and things like that. And we're sort of expecting that might come with residential as well. It hasn't technically yet, but there's a caveat in our code that requires a building permit for a fence over 6 feet tall, which currently doesn't jive with what the building permit program says, which is 7 feet. So we're going to just get rid of that language or modify it so that it gives us some flexibility when they land on what it is. So there's a couple things we've identified, but I haven't fleshed out the draft yet to bring you guys. So, Mr. Whalen.
Question, when I saw this, I mean, if somebody has a chain link and say there was Churchdale and River Road, right next to the tie, on the other
Yeah.
side of that intersection. Can't remember the family's name. If they wanted to put up a chain link there and it says transparent, does it only have to be like, say, 15 feet back from the corner so there's no sight obstruction? Part of it could be
Sure. I think
Locked.
honestly, Commissioner Whalen, I think that would be something that I would be looking to you as a body to make that recommendation. I haven't talked with it on my staff to get a better idea, on Nate's staff, they're not my staff, but I haven't talked with them to get a better idea of what the concerns are. Obviously, vision clearance, my years of doing code enforcement, I am very keenly aware that vision clearance is a problem. So I would say for sure, we're gonna wanna be looking at vision clearance areas. We may wanna expand that beyond that as well. But I think that's gonna probably be one of the discussion points that people will wanna talk about.
because I can see someone wanting the chain link it's the fact it's a one-time installation. But a lot of times they'll put some kind of a plant growth around it to sort of conceal that.
Right.
But you can't have that and still obstruct. So
Right.
I want to prevent that from happening because it's a beautification in a sense,
Sure.
but not compromise safety.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, and I'll try to put together some language that makes sense, and then absolutely want to have your input on how we implement that. The next one for accessory structures, I kind of term it as, it's the text amendment needed to clarify Nate's czar-like powers. Currently, we have a limit on accessory structures, we have standards on accessory structures. What we don't have clearly in our code, and I don't know that this is the right section yet, I haven't picked the brains of these two guys who are much smarter than me, and I'm gonna need some legal department's help. But what we have right now is, there's been many times where folks wanna have a larger shop than maybe we allow, because we only allow 600 square feet. One of the ways that people do that is by building a larger garage that's attached to their house or having a larger standard garage. My folks built a brand new house about 14, 15 years ago. My dad wanted a bigger garage to put his boat and have a shop area. So they found a house plan that looks like a 2-car garage, but the garage is super deep, like double deep. And so there's nothing in our code that says you can't have a garage-heavy house. And so that's what a lot of folks have done. And then there's been this ambiguity because the code doesn't clearly spell out what makes it a single-family dwelling with an attached garage versus this or that. And so a lot of people try to get creative. They're like, well, what if I put up a board? Or what if I put up a breezeway? Or what if I do this? So what we're aiming to clarify here is what the appropriate level of attachment is to consider the structure truly part of the home. Right now, we simply say to them, it needs to be a significant structural attachment. There's a few things that we give them as kind of rules of thumb that make sense to us, but ultimately, anyone who comes in with a plan that is not a true absolute wall-to-wall, habitable space to habitable space, I just built onto my house perfectly attachment detail, Nate has to make some sort of a zoning administrator interpretation. So we want to clarify that kind of once and for all for applicants more than anything, and maybe for Shane. So. Peanut gallery. The next one on the list is section 2.427, our wireless telecommunication facilities section. Yep, WTF. The text amendment is, we believe there's a text amendment that's necessary, and I'm not sure how large or small it's going to be. It's being driven by changes to the building code, and that is that cell towers are now exempt from pulling building permits. So in the past, yeah, it surprised us. We had a big meeting, or a big discussion at least, with the building official over at Marion County. In the past, when a cell tower would need to be, antenna arrays changed out or added to or replaced or expanded, there's a building permit. So our review process puts it across my desk or Nate's desk or Dina's desk, and we get to look at it to go, okay, does this comply with our development code? Well, with them creating this exemption in the building code, there's no trigger for us to see them. So what we're trying to analyze, and we don't have quite a good enough, I don't have a good enough handle on the building code piece of it yet, is whether or not we need to have a separate review procedure and permitting process, and what exactly that needs to look like. But what we do know is we're gonna have to modify the way our code is written a little bit so that it captures the ability for us to say, hey, right now we say we don't want brand new cell towers smack dab in the middle of our neighborhoods or our backyards because of the visual. Yes, Counselor.
When I worked for City Parks in Salem, West Salem, you get that water tower over there up on the hill. Underneath it's a very small park. So I would go maintain it. And on that water tower, they use comms, different T-Mobile, those are examples, and they pay the city of Salem to have them up there. My question, Shane, is that possible to go do an agreement with those to use our tower, our water tower?
I think I would defer to Mr. Johnson on that. I know that, not exactly the same, but we've had a lot of intrigue from the different cell providers for what's called small cell site stuff to be done in rights of way. And I believe that, I don't know, Shannon, do you want to kind of talk about that, the dynamic of the right of, no, you don't?
Thanks.
Just, it's a franchise agreement issue, like that's about as much as I can say on it.
Yeah. We're still working on some regulations that they're actually non-land use regulations for regulating and charging to put small cell antennas up in the rights of way on utility poles, on our poles or other poles. That's separate from the water tower question. I am surprised, frankly, that we haven't been approached. We were approached, you may know, a few years back now, we had the AT&T tower. I call it the AT&T tower up in Bear Park. That's a fairly new one. We were approached about some property over in Keizer Station that didn't work out, but we've never been approached about the water tower. And I'm not sure if there's some technical reasons for that or what.
Well, we just actually had an inquiry today about a cell company, not a cell company, an antenna company.
Right, they're all antenna companies now.
Yeah, who wanted to locate on some facilities by the stadium. And so our code actually encourages co-location and using existing facilities.
What's the facility there they co-locate?
Well, one of them.
Don't get into it, that's fine.
One of them was the high voltage transmission tower
Yeah.
I'm like,
Boost your signal.
Wonder how these.
Yeah.
have no idea.
So getting back to the permits for these, which essentially is utility, if PGE or Salem Electric or whatever says, hey, we want to expand our substation in the area, do they have to get a building permit?
Well,
I mean, are utilities somehow exempt from building permits? Is that why this is happening?
No.
a lot of the time, utilities do have exemptions in the building code. They still have
I don't know about a
review
substation.
through us. Yeah, I don't
If
think a
somebody's going to be building a new
substation would.
substation.
No, I mean, not a new one. They have one, it needs to be expanded because of whatever, they've got the space. They've only.
Oh, they would most likely need a building permit for that then.
They're going to expand it.
Yeah, if you're putting on a new group of whatever those funny things are,
They can
transformers.
expand the fence, they gotta expand the groundway, they may have to put up a building. They have to-
I think this is kind of a one-off, Mark.
Okay.
I don't know.
I just didn't know if we-
What changed in the building code? I'm just flabbergasted. These guys told me about this a few weeks ago, and I just told Nate right now. You guys told me about this, but I thought I was dreaming. Are you right? Because I just asked Nate right now, sorry to be whispering while Shane's talking. I said, are you talking about adding an antenna to an existing cell tower or a new tower? He said, no, a new tower, brand new, nothing there. You're putting up a 100-foot tower and there's no building permit? I don't get it.
Well,
Okay.
obviously, there's more to the story that we don't know about, but, and I am honestly not sure if the support structure that goes along with the tower is also exempt. I think it may be, but I don't know if there are boundaries or
Yeah.
You mean the comm
parameters.
shack?
Yeah, yeah.
I believe it is.
Well, there'd be at least a 4-foot fence, so.
So we're good. We're good.
Yeah, perfect.
Building permit for
It's
the
all
fence
set.
only?
So clearly, this would be an item on the list that's going to require some more fleshing out, because we just found out recently, I mean, it was just a few weeks ago, we had the meeting with Marion County to see what this meant. I've just briefly kind of looked at our WTF section to see, okay, what is going to be needed. And then the other piece of that bullet point was the small cell right-of-way things, and that's obviously predicated on the project that Mr. Johnson was referring to. If something changes, if there's, right now, we have a provision in our wireless section that says you could locate a new cell tower within the city right-of-way if you get a conditional use permit, and there's a bunch of different little things that go along with it. My expectation is that this new ordinance that's being worked on will cover all the right-of-way area, so that little weird caveat I have in the code, we would no longer need it, or we would need to change it to line up with what is going to happen in the, what is it, a franchise ordinance?
Ordinance, really.
Okay, so that's where this one, timing wise, it's kind of, there's a twofold timing issue that I'm trying to kind of work through to figure out. So, any other questions on that one before we move on? Okay, so this next one, I'm gonna just say, oh, sorry.
Yes, there's a cell, correct me if I'm wrong, Shane, there's a cell tower over by the ballparks, when you're going through the Elders Care, the Elders Center and the news apartment complexes. You take that dog legs around.
Yeah, right behind the church.
And that's city-owned property?
No, the cell tower that's behind the church is on the church's property, I believe.
Church's property.
Yeah.
Who owns the property between the road and the,
I
Are we
believe,
talking about Little League fields?
the Little League fields are just south of that.
I think it's the Church of Christ, right, that's on the corner?
Yeah, where I'm going with this is
Yeah.
when people see a field with a tower on it, it's like, we
Yeah.
could be doing something with this property.
Yeah.
Is that a conditional use? Is that the only?
So Frank, I would have to look it up. I don't think they had to get a conditional use because of the zoning. I think it was just a building permit. But I don't know that for 100% for sure. I do remember when they erected that tower, and I know it was a deal that the church made with AT&T or whoever put up the tower and whatnot. And I believe they did have to grant an easement to them also to get access to it with their trucks and equipment.
So currently we have in our zone, in our code, which by the way, the title of this code is our very favorite in the entire code. Currently, we have acceptable sites where you don't need a conditional use. You have to, though, we rely upon the building permit process. Preferred sites, yeah. And then there are some where you have to get a conditional use permit. So what we're wrestling with is, do we simply make all of them conditional use so that we can evaluate future development potential, those kinds of things. So that's one of the things we will be wrestling with in putting this together.
Anything else? No, okay. So the next one on the list, actually, I'm just going to let Nate talk about it because I call it the wrong thing every time we talk about it. So Nate, do you want to talk about the SCATS one?
Well, this is honestly, we have a meeting tomorrow to go through the final contract provisions for our SCATS funding. That's Salem Keizer Transportation Study, which is our local metropolitan planning organization, which basically that's how the federal funds come to us, is through that MPO. This study is funded through a project allocation through that process. And we are just now beginning it. As I said, we are going to finalize the contract tomorrow. Well, hopefully, the decision to get all the provisions identified in the contract tomorrow. So we are starting this study immediately. The purpose of this study is to take 3 separate scenarios of potential growth scenarios in the city of Keizer. This addresses our limited UGB and what we plan to do about our limited UGB. The 3 different scenarios are going to be basically, do we simply pull the stopper, get a divorce, and expand the UGB to the north by 500, 600 acres? Or do we simply say, you know what, the total UGB is enough to accommodate both Salem's and ours, so we're going to do nothing, or we're going to upzone where we can in Keizer, and what does that mean to our transportation system? So all of this is very specific engineering study to look at our transportation system and say, if so many more trips hit the Wheatland River intersection, what does that mean? And what are the improvements that would have to be built? And what is, more importantly, what is the price tag? And how are you going to accommodate it? So that study is beginning right now. We don't have a specific, this is different than the revitalization project that we just did. There is not a specific component that says this has got to go to Planning Commission for review, but I'm not sure exactly what is going to come out of this, and there may be sections where we want your input in that as we work with the consultants. It is focused on technical and not particularly, it's not a legislative thing, it's a technical thing based on number of trips and capacities of intersections. And though we will keep you informed of that and we will share that information with you, it is not like there are policy questions along the way that we're going to have to say. This is simply an idea to guide future policy questions.
And that's what I would add. I think the biggest, we kind of, well, should I put that on the list or not? And they said, yeah, let's put it on the list and talk to them about it, so at least they know it's coming. And it really is more of a advisory piece, but I think that it will be very important that when we kind of get the results of that project and that study done, that we will want to present it to you, at least to give it to you as informational, because it should be kind of the foundational element of helping Planning Commission and ultimately City Council setting policies according to data as we move forward with the things we're trying to accomplish in the long-range planning world. Yes, sir.
We spent a few months, not only us, there was a citizens group too with the housing needs analysis and buildable lands. And as I recall, we kind of came out of that and said, let's work with what we have. Mm-hmm. So how does this tie into that work that's been done?
So that work that has been done was done particularly to inform the council in their decisions about the urban growth boundary in the future. This honestly is the final piece in the puzzle in my book as to, before the council can definitively say we are or we are not, or what we are doing, they need to know exactly why they're making that choice, not from an emotional or whatever reason. simply, it would be nice to say, if we choose to do this, we need to be prepared for this kind of SDC based on this specific number of dollars that are needed for transportation impacts. So your SDC would have to be increased by double, by 10 times, whatever that is. And so this is an effort to give very specific technical information to the council for them to make that decision. So yes, the HNA BLI was done with that recommendation, and it was done with the informed guidance of a prominent consultant who is accepted statewide as being foremost authority. But
And the one thing I'd add, Nate, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the other piece that kind of connects the dots is that with that recommendation out of the HNABLI, ultimately the committee said, accommodate the growth within. Like, we don't want to pursue the expansion. So I believe that is going to be one of the scenarios that's looked at, is to kind of look at that recommendation that was made to say, because even with a no expansion recommendation, we still are going to see growth and change with redevelopment. That's, the River Cherry Overlay District things, as those things get implemented. So that is I believe that's one of the projected growth scenarios we've identified that we want them to look at. So it won't be the only one, but so there will be that connection also. Like, I don't know if you already said that. If you did, I apologize. But so at least in my mind, that's where it makes the most sense connected.
I'm sure he didn't say it that clearly, but so, I mean, there are 3 different scenarios that we are going to take and actually put numbers to, look at do traffic counts and look at intersection capacity and say, this has the capacity to accept X number more trips. This intersection does not. Before anything can happen, this improvement in the TSP has to be constructed. Those are the kinds of things that we are looking to get out of this specific study.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the next one on the list, and this one is actually, I think this, out of all the things on the list, this is one of the ones that I would really like to hear input from you all on. And if you're not prepared to tonight, that's fine. You can email me separately. It's a working list that we're going to work with. But I kind of deemed it as efficiency measures and have a big bold ongoing. Efficiency measures has been kind of listed in our work program for several years also. That's what happens when you're a city that gets built out to the UGB and the state says we got to implement efficiency measures. Now, this list that we kind of came up with in part jives with the housing strategies document, which was the document that was not the BLI piece, but okay, we have this need, here's some strategies to get it done. And so that's where, the first bullet point on the list is possibility, do we want to consider a straight 4,000 square foot lot size citywide? The second one, for middle housing provisions, we've done some of that in the River Cherry Overlay District. We have some of those provisions. Do we want to explore and remove additional barriers and be more aggressive with those strategies at a greater clip than just the River Cherry Overlay District, is essentially what I'm getting at there. And then the third one on the list is the 2.432, the cottage cluster developments. I anecdotally have identified that there's several, I would say, barriers to seeing cottage clusters developed in Keizer. The way it's written, it was written out of our 2012 or whatever. It was the last HNA they did before I had much to do with it. Yeah, which 2013. Yeah. So we kind of adopted that out of that, and we never saw it implemented. And some of the things are there's no density bonus. It was basically there were no real properties that you could really do a cottage cluster on. I had 3 or 4 legitimate developers try to look at doing them, and they ultimately always went back to, it doesn't make sense for me. I'm not going to go with that alternative housing type because it's not advantageous to me in any way, shape, or form, and just go with standard development. And that's what they chose to do, which they could still choose to do that. What we're suggesting, and I would point out that House Bill 2001 is going to most likely mandate us to do is modify it anyway. So the question mark there for me is that something that we might want to tackle ahead of time? With the provisions of House Bill 2001, we don't technically have to be implementing things until like June of 2022, I believe. So we've got some time, and there's going to be a lot of guidance documentation that comes through DLCD over the next year on that. But we already know as a city, we've identified through our housing strategies document, there's some things we might want to look at. So what I'm very interested to hear from you all is, are there any things on these lists that you would like to see us say, yeah, let's maybe approach that this year, look into it, reach out to, community stakeholders, or let's do a text amendment? That would be helpful for me to know. Yes, sir.
I have a question for Matt. In the previous meeting, we had recommended to the city council to do 900 square feet. Since then, they said we're going to go back to 750. My question is...
On ADUs?
ADUs, yes. My question, Matt, is, or Chairman, can I expand that action that they did in making a proposal in the middle housing or ADU housing, that since they've recommended to go 750 because it was a question of affordability, could we not ask if those people who want to build an ADU to give them an easement or not so hard on the system development fees if they were to negotiate that space being affordability for X amount of time? Could I ask that now or should I wait?
Nate's spinning his wheels, so I'm going to...
Yeah, well, they're still spinning. So certainly you have the ability as the planning commission, but by the consensus of all the planning commission, you have the ability to identify policies and issues that you think you would like to address. I'm not sure you've got your idea completely formulated, but if what I'm hearing is you are suggesting that we create some incentives for affordability through, I'm not even sure why you would limit it to ADUs, but you would have the ability to suggest that we work on creating incentives for affordable housing. That you could do. You don't have the opportunity, though, to change what the council did. I mean, I suppose the council could say, we disagree with your decision to lower the threshold for an ADU, but I'm not sure that would be worth your time because we don't have a text amendment on the table. That would require initiating a whole new process that the council would at this point have to direct because it was their action. But if you wanted to address the issue of creating affordability incentives, that is something that could go on this list.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but during the HNA BLI, that was one of the efficiency measures that was being looked at over the course of trying to accomplish a lot of the housing needs, was sort of going very much with what he's recommending, which is creating those. So it kind of came full circle a little bit. That's kind of a different topic, but I think overall in terms of looking at efficiency measures, I recognize that as one of the ones we have talked about. So.
And part of the, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, in that, you're absolutely right. And part of the state statute for doing housing needs analysis is that you have to look at all housing types and all needs and all levels of incomes. And House Bill 2001 has actually changed that and expanded that for all future housing needs analysis as well. So there is an element of affordability. That is not something that I'd included in this work program, because generally when we're talking about SDCs or waivers or fee schedules, that's all policy directive of city council. But I think that it would, Nate kind of said it, I think maybe that's something that if by consensus planning commission wants to take up, and I could add a bullet point to the list of looking into affordable housing options for incentivizing or whatever you might want to do, that might be a good option.
Is that what you were alluding to, was adding that as part of it? Because I guess I got kind of lost when you were
Yes.
talking about the ADU piece.
Correct.
Versus wanting to address that specific issue of the affordable housing piece.
I've been wanting to, and I would like to inject that at this time.
Can
Councilor Freeman?
I add to that? It's on my list. I'm like, pick me, pick me. So a hot topic at the state level for home ownership is waiving system development charges for for-profit developers who build affordable housing, with the caveats of income restriction, whether that's, 100% of AMI, area median income, or 120 or whatever. So I guess I would like to throw that in as a discussion to see what that would look like. I get that it's a loss of revenue to the city, and we're not a large city, and sometimes that's painful from a budget perspective, but I get that question a lot.
Sure.
For full disclosure, I work at Oregon Housing, and so they know I sit on city council, and I get that question a lot. But it's also a topic that is coming up, and I know other communities like Metro is looking at it wholeheartedly for more affordable home ownership development. So just would like to throw that out.
Part of the reason that we did not include that particular topic in this list is it's not just a matter of saying, oh, we're going to waive SDCs for affordable housing. It requires a restructuring of your system development charge structure. And everything on that, you don't just make up a number for your SDCs. That number is derived from your project list and the anticipated costs and the amount of those costs, how much trips they're going to serve. And it is a per trip cost based on the specific list of improvements. Now, if you decide, oh, we're going to waive SDCs and they are no longer going to pay into those costs, that means those SDC rates have to be increased in order, or the city has to pay. And I don't know if you've sat through the budget process here, but there's not exactly a vacant fund that's just gathering money. So the reason we didn't is because it's not just a simple decision of, well, do we do this? I mean, it's a decision of, well, do we do this and start the process, the large process. I think I liked Mark Collier's, Commissioner Collier's term today is about staffing bandwidth. How much bandwidth do we have in our staffing to be able to accomplish this? And to be quite honest, it is limited. So that's the reason we did not put a larger kind of thing on that, particularly in this point in time where everything is in flux. With the Senate bill about to hit us in 2 years and all of the different changes that we're going to have to make with all the different housing types, et cetera, my personal preference, I can't speak for everybody, but my preference is I think we need to see our way through some of this cloud that is on our horizon before we make some decisions about where we're spending our resources and how we are going to consume that bandwidth.
Shannon, you had your hand up for a minute. Are you?
Nate pretty much covered it more eloquently than I could. The only other thing I'll add, which I think Nate or Shane already mentioned, it's always hard to kind of do is, yeah, you guys can always kind of do what you want to do, but SDCs are not really the purview of the Planning Commission. It's a fee. I mean, obviously, that fee affects housing, which is kind of a land use issue, but it's typically never been in the purview of Planning Commission. If you feel strongly about it and want to just express your opinion as a body to the council, but it wouldn't be a formal process, if you will.
If I may interject, sorry. I can tell you that the city of Keizer's SDC fees as a whole are very low compared to other communities in this area.
I look at the list and I kind of put it in 3 categories for myself. I put it in things that we need to do as soon as we can so we don't end up sitting here and December of 2021 going, God, I wish we'd have got that done earlier. Because it's not just us. It also has to go to the community and the council, and we don't know what may come up. So I look at something like, for example, House Bill 2001. We need to put some significant effort and get that done as soon as we can. I look at other things that are the low-hanging fruit. Some things that would be easy to do, make sense. Let's do a 4-foot fence talk or whatever. Something that just to take care of, get that off the list. Then I look at opportunities, and I see an opportunity on this list that I think we really need to explore. And to me, that becomes a priority, and that's the employment lands opportunity.
You're jumping ahead.
Well, we're not down that far on the list yet? No. Oh, okay. Well, at any rate, I thought we were, I have a small page. But at any rate, that's my view as far as the whole list is concerned. That's my approach at it. So I'm reluctant at this point to add anything to it until we get some of the real high priority things situated.
Fair enough. Mr. Prince?
Speaking on efficiency measures before we move on, there's a couple things here on subpoints. The 4,000 square foot lot size for detached. With the limited amount of infill development that we have, I certainly would like to see at least a variable standard to go below 5,000 square foot for single family.
Okay. When you say variable, help me understand, because kind of we have the provision for a 4,000 square foot lot with attached.
Or zero lot lines.
Or zero lot line.
But there's that 1,000 square foot difference if it's 5,000 square foot.
I'm just, when you say variable, I'm just trying to understand what kind of variability you are.
Tied to lot size, Mark?
Yes.
Or?
Yes, like 20%, say 20% below 5,000 square feet, and you can still have a single family detached structure. You're not kicked over to the zero lot line requirement. And then picking up on the hurdles to cottage cluster development, Shane, it's been a few months since I've looked at that. If I remember, there's no incentive for parking either.
No,
it's 2 per.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Yeah, between the parking and the overall density, I mean, honestly.
Minimum size.
It didn't, the minimum size of the parent lot has to be, we don't have hardly any pieces that are like that. And again, I haven't fine tooth and combed and analyzed the new language from Senate, from the bill. Frankly, Shannon has to do that for me. I'm not a lawyer. But they have some actual definitions tied to what a cottage cluster development is, what size the buildings actually can be or have to be. So I know we actually, by law, will have to change that section. And this would be in that vein, at least my concept, it would be in that vein of, well, okay, what if we kind of early implemented this? Because right now we have this cottage cluster section that isn't functioning at all. It may still not function, the market may not still support it, but we could remove some barriers and have a discussion about it and make it better. So, but yeah, you're right, the parking is a major problem. And I think we would be looking as a staff to kind of look at the recently adopted stuff in the RCOD zone where we've lowered some parking standards, doing some things like that, and then wanting to kind of work with legal as far as the new language in House Bill 2001 to kind of make sure, okay, these things are going to line up for a new cottage cluster section. If that makes sense. Okay.
Are you getting the feedback?
Yeah, I think I'm getting good feedback, and we can have further discussions as we move forward too. I don't think it's anything, I don't need like a formal recommendation. It's just the big things I want to hear is if there's an like absolutely nots or absolutely yeses, that helps us kind of know what to bring when. So then we're almost done, and almost to Mark's point. The next one on the list could be a little bit of a hot topic, but I put on the list as kind of an option, no real time frame attached. The revitalization plan identified a few properties for upzoning. that are currently zoned RM to look to upzone those to MU. It also identified properties that are RS to upzone to RM. What we're talking about here in these two that I pulled specifically would be the discussion about that manufactured home park that's currently RM, the large parcel where the Trail Avenue extension is intended to go through that's RM. Does the Planning Commission want to initiate legislative rezones to move those to the mixed use designation and approach that and move forward on those in this next calendar year? Or do we want to wait, I guess, is basically what the question is.
Regarding the Lock Haven Trail property, Mr. Earl's property, that has long been talked about as, Verda's going to go here and we're going to go there.
Yeah.
But I don't think we can or should really move too far ahead on that without having a conversation with the property owner.
Sure.
I mean, the property owner has first and foremost rights. So before we start planning for what's going to happen potentially to theirs, I think they need to be part of a dialogue, part of a discussion.
I have
Just a personal
not,
feeling.
I have not had a conversation with Mr. Earl for a few years now, but my previous conversation, I do know that he is interested in maximizing his development potential. So I don't anticipate that will be it, but you're right, absolutely right.
Yeah.
The property owner needs to be engaged in the process earlier rather than later. And this would, with this on the list, what we anticipate is that this would be a signal to staff to start engaging those conversations. It's not just show up next month with a, here's your rezone, ha-ha, kind of thing.
And again, this would be kind of in that vein of what Commissioner Collier alluded to is kind of the priority level that I kind of wanted to gauge. I actually did have a conversation with Mr. Earl because we invited him to be one of our stakeholders for the River Cherry Overlay District project. And at one of those stakeholder meetings, which actually Nate was not at that one, so he didn't have the conversation. I kind of forgot about that. But I had mentioned to him, I said, he goes, what does this mean for me? And I was like, well, actually, in the plan, they're recommending that we would upzone your property to mixed use instead of medium density. And he goes, oh, I'm all for that. If I can do more things, that's good. Now, obviously, there's no discussion about infrastructure needs or any of that kind of stuff. But that is, I guess, what I'm looking for from Planning Commission. If that's something that's a priority to Planning Commission to start pursuing, then yeah, we would want to get our wheels kind of going on having some deeper conversations with property owners. The manufactured home park, super hot topic, but that one would be one where that's probably a big conversation to have with the residents and the owners of the manufactured home park and because there's clearly some concerns there with any kind of rezone and displacement concerns and affordability concerns and all of that. But if we identify as a planning commission that we feel that those couple of properties that are larger properties, that it's a larger priority to rezone those sooner than later, then I think that's kind of what we're looking for. Yes, sir.
What's the zoning of the property to be the north end of the Trail Avenue to River Road?
Mixed use.
Is that all mixed use?
Yeah, so basically.
Including the house on the hill?
Yes, the old house, the training house, yeah. Yeah, so the I Love A pieces, kind of everything in the middle of Trail and River. Don Earl's is RM. Basically, everything else is in mixed use already.
All right.
So is there any, with the scats, is that going to focus mainly on the Brooks River area, or is it going to be?
No.
It's all of Keizer.
It's all.
So I guess my question is.
And in fact, some intersections even in the outlying SCATS area.
Is there any wisdom to waiting to see what the results of that before we start to pursue any additional legislative rezones to kind of see if, frankly, it makes sense, right? So if maybe MU may not be the right zone for that change, I'd rather not waste the time and effort of the staff, resources and all the other stuff, if the transportation study comes back and says, this just doesn't make any sense. That's just my own personal feeling. We have much more, I think, pressing issues to get to.
Yes.
That's a really good point, Matt.
but part of me says, I'm not sure the outcome of the study is really going to influence one way or the other, the efficacy of whether we pursue the rezone or not, because it's still property within our jurisdiction. We do know that we want to pursue efficiency measures, all those kinds of things. But I think going back to Mark's term, the bandwidth issues,
Right.
I think your point is well taken.
Because I think personally, if we're going to look at a legislative rezone, if we're going to tackle that in 2020, certainly looking at the area we talked about, the UT, probably makes more sense if we're going to try to tackle a legislative rezone. I think that's,
Well, and
we've already been engaging with the property owners, maybe I'm wrong, but
No, I think,
yeah, please.
I think it's an excellent point. I was going to pat you on the back, but I couldn't get the pin out of my hand. The only thing consideration would be is if you have a cooperative landowner that is perhaps excited about what you're talking about,
wants to do it.
then
Sure.
it's an opportunity that you wouldn't necessarily get.
And clearly, this would not preclude an applicant-initiated zone change. I mean, any of those property owners in the RCOD, there's now a comprehensive plan amendment that kind of shows them, oh, if I want to go do something, there's support for that.
So maybe there's a middle piece that we're not talking about. Is there an opportunity to just bring them in, have a conversation, an open dialogue, maybe not necessarily in the form of a public hearing or anything like that, but just sit down and say, hey, this is kind of what we're looking at, and maybe you guys can satisfy that. But very similar to what we did with the UT zone.
Sure.
We invited them in, we had a few stakeholders come in. For the most part, they didn't necessarily understand it, but then a few people were very supportive of it. You know, that might be the thing, and maybe out of that, you have those one or two, like, you know, Mark's suggesting to say, no, we really want to do this now because it's going to increase our marketability for the land.
So, just really quickly,
So if we have, what I'm saying is we have a low month and we're looking at where we have
Yeah.
a low month, you guys could just take and
okay.
throw that in.
I was going to say, so
My own
if,
thought.
just for my purposes, when I kind of go back to my office, because I kind of keep the work plan on my desk to keep me on track through the year. So would it be fair, just consensus-wise, if everybody kind of just nods or shakes or whatever, if instead of saying really this as being a legislative rezone, but more the initiate communication with property owners about that possibility, that's more accurate, you think?
Well,
Okay.
I think that as a commission, we made the recommendation to council to adopt the revitalization plan. What's our next step but to implement it?
And there was that comprehensive plan amendment that did change that whole picture in the background. So, and the problem is, they're kind of two different issues. The River and Lock Haven piece is a much bigger kind of, you've got the affordability housing and all of those questions. Then you have a vacant piece of property that is prime for development, that the property owner is anxious to have it be developed. They're kind of two different, I mean, the rezone is a rezone, that's true, but they're two different animals. And so I would think the one would be much easier to accomplish than the other.
Well, I get the redesignation piece. I don't think you fail when you engage the people impacted. Now, whether or not they paid attention to the revitalization plan, and that notwithstanding, I think there's always a benefit to reaching out to the folks and saying, hey, this is kind of what we're thinking. This is what's happened. This is the potential looking forward. And so, not to be argumentative, but I think that, you know, there's some wisdom to talking with folks. If there's anything I've learned over the last 5 years of working in the city and doing volunteer service, the more often that you talk with folks and have an explanation and have that dialogue, the chances for a less contentious and more cooperative process exists, I personally feel.
Sure.
Frank.
Staying on Lock Haven and looking at McLeod and Chamawa, that little land triangle, is that part of Keizer Station?
There you see.
Okay, that's Area C, so that's already been earmarked for that?
It's already been master planned,
Okay.
such as it is.
Anything else? We're good? Okay? Okay, so the next one on the list, TSP update. It'll be a huge project. It probably really isn't a 2020 project, but we wanted to put that on everyone's radar. We've identified that through the HNABLI process, through the SCAT study process that we're about to embark on, through the RCOD, the Cherry Overlay District, we need to kind of update our TSP to look at what our infrastructure needs are and all of that. That's going to obviously be grant dependent and grant funded. Generally, grant cycles come out in the springs, so we are contemplating applying for a grant this upcoming year. Work probably wouldn't really start until a year later, so it really is probably 2021, but we wanted to put that on the list because there may be some things that need to happen when we go to apply for that grant. I mean, we have to have a council resolution to apply for grants. There's some things like that. So since it will be something that will involve planning commission, we want to make sure you're aware of that. The next one is really just in there as kind of it's really general, the consideration of possible early implementation of House Bill 2001 measures.
Kind of related to the earlier bullet.
Yeah.
And it is to the efficiency measures. The reason it's in there the way it is, and I didn't really put any bullets around it because I don't know exactly what that looks like. There's been some discussion, and it's all just been kind of words at this point. There hasn't been any official emails sent out, but there has been some discussion that there may be some grant help available down the road if a city is willing to do some early implementation, but they're not there yet because the LCD hasn't even done the recommended, hey, here's what we think you should be doing. And so really why that's there is I would like to kind of get a feel if that comes up and there is an opportunity for the city to work with a consultant team to come up with some ideas for early implementation of that, if that's something that we as a city and community and you as a planning commission want to pursue, or if we want to hold out and wait a little bit and kind of see how things pan out. The strategies document that came from ECHO with the HNABLI, they had actually in that strategies document identified some things with different years associated with them. For example, if you remember, one of the big discussions was tiny houses. And with the tiny houses, they said, and by consensus, the committee and everybody agreed, we don't really want to mess with tiny houses yet. Let's wait about 5 years. And that's, an estimate. But the reasoning was, let's wait and see what other cities do and what kind of unknown issues may come up with that. We don't feel like we're there yet. So that was so that one got answered. But the other stuff that's being talked about, we've never really had that conversation as much. So that's why I put that bullet in there. So I was really kind of looking for knee-jerk reactions and where you all kind of stand on that.
Well, my knee-jerk reaction is I think we should be aware and have our antenna up for opportunity.
Okay.
But again, with the broad bandwidth of staff,
Sure.
I don't think we should ask staff to commit much time to that unless any grant opportunities, for example, come with the guarantee that once this is implemented, they're not going to change something. We're not going to have to scrap all this stuff.
Sure.
Because we've all seen that happen.
ADUs, anyone?
And you guys are essentially going to be looking at two simultaneous transportation studies at the same time. You just got through a year of doing two very large projects at the same time. So, I mean, if you all want that punishment, that's up to you. But I agree with Commissioner Whalen on that.
I want to have our eyes open, but I don't want it to result in a lot of staff time being diverted from something that can actually be implemented and achieved.
And I feel like, speaking to what you said, Shane, I think there's already some things in here where we're looking at some of those efficiency measures in House Bill 2001 anyways, so we kind of already answered the question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing it, but we're not chasing grants, so to speak. I mean, getting the low-hanging fruit that makes sense to try to bring us up to comport with the statute.
Okay.
I know that there are a number of places of worship that are venturing into affordable housing on their property. And so when you say tiny houses and you combine that with them, I wouldn't be surprised to see that on the radar. Mm-hmm. Just knowing that, I think would would be just a heads up.
Sure. All right. So the last one on the list. Hey, you want to talk about this one? This one is like almost the shortest one on the list. I think it might be the most loaded one, however.
Yeah.
So, in all of the discussion that we have had on the urban growth boundary, all of the work that has been done on the buildable lands inventory, the housing needs analysis, all of that information is kind of in the background to address our housing needs and address our urban growth boundary as it pertains to providing for housing types across the spectrum. One of the things that has been kind of quiet and in the background is when we adopted our economic opportunities analysis, there was an aspirational statement there that there can be a justified need for 49 acres of employment lands based on 5 specific target industries. And that was adopted and acknowledged by the state. One of the things that I would propose to you is that we have the opportunity to pursue an urban growth boundary for employment land, which is a separate process and governed by different rules than the housing urban growth boundary expansion. I would like to propose to you that we figure out how to pursue that and how to do that in the near future. And so I am suggesting that this be included on the list for us to have the nod to start spending staff time and resources on how to get this accomplished in a reasonable fashion. I don't know what those, I am not familiar enough with this specific brand of UGB expansion, so I'm ill-equipped to say I know exactly what it is, but I think that we have an opportunity that we should at least seize upon the work that has already been done. So I'm suggesting that this be on the list as one of the items that we work on in this coming year.
So quick question before I give it to Commissioner. What are the specific industries? Is that something you're able to talk about now? Okay.
One is educational, one is back office, accounting, et cetera. One is sports-related facilities. Medical office. And the other one.
And number 5.
We're not going to get into that. We don't want to get into it.
We can get you that information. It is
secret.
It is not secret. It's
Basically not retail.
No.
Correct, not
it's
retail.
employment.
It was truly for job creation and it was created, I think, partly through the Keizer Compass project and then ultimately our EOA that was done in 2012, 2013. And we could send that out to all the commissioners just as a follow-up to this meeting to say, hey, here's what the 5 target industries were.
In fact, it's very specific, not retail and not housing. Now, with the current evolution of how we do our mixed use, I don't know, maybe there is a potential for incorporating true mixed use into it. I don't know that for a fact right at the moment. But I do know that it must be demonstrated that it is targeted to those 5 industries that we have already previously adopted, which went through the whole algebra evaluation as to how many acres that our need could demonstrate, and that we adopted specifically that number. So I think we're governed by that and we're bound by that. It's not like we could suddenly say, oh, well, just kidding, we're going to do 75 acres because that's too small, whatever. I mean, if we do, sure, we could go through that process again. But right now, we kind of have an already established opportunity that I think that we should pursue and should focus some resources on accomplishing.
Commissioner Whalen.
Thank you. I fully support that. I think, historically, Keizer is a bedroom community. And probably, I don't know, just spitballing a number, 75 or 80% of the family wage jobs and benefits occur by people that live here, but they work in Salem, they work in Wilsonville, Woodburn, north of here. And I think there's tremendous upside to having the opportunity to provide land and then getting somehow a group to market that opportunity. We look at what's happening out in Salem, out in all their development out there and the things that have been built. I mean, that's a huge boon to that community. And I think we should get a piece of that. I think we owe that to our community to try to provide local family wage jobs. And from that, we can solve some of our budgetary issues we have.
And just so you know, it's not like taking a shopping cart down the aisle of the grocery store and saying, well, I think we're just going to put that in the cart. There are some technical issues that have to be established. Right. The site suitability analysis. I don't know if that location is better north of the stadium or if it's better along North River Road. There are some questions that we are going to have to answer and get some very specific factual information in order to be able to do that. So we're talking about retaining consultants. We're talking about some specific outside help in order to get this accomplished.
Even with that, I think this is going to be our easiest yes of the year.
Well, and especially if you get if you get the opportunity for mixed use too, I think it's just going to sort of double down on the opportunity. I know that's a big if.
It is a big if because it wasn't.
I feel like they'd see right through that one.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to be able to provide some assurances.
Yeah.
Because, Keizer Station long has the reputation that it was established as employment lands and it turned into nothing but retail, which I argue is not true, but certainly it's...
There's a few medical offices and stuff, but by and large...
By and large, it's retail. And so we kind of have that, in the land use community, we have that stigma that, look what happened to Keizer Station. And so it is going to take some strong assurances and some strong commitments on the part of the city to be able to get it accomplished. I think there are some real opportunities, though. Now, there's no such thing as a free lunch, and so those commitments, I don't know. We're going to have to figure those out as we go through the process. But
that's near the top, if not the top of my priority list.
It's the opportunity.
Right. I'm not hearing any no's from anybody. Awesome. So much for your contention.
So, honestly, the rest of that list of stuff we did last year, it was just really to say, hey, you may have felt like all we did was talk about ADUs or talk to UT property owners, but we actually did accomplish a fair share last year. When I went back through, I was like, hey, good work. And honestly, in that list, there was some extremely heavy lifting that got done for some things that we spent multiple meetings on for the RCOD stuff, for the HNA BLI stuff. Really good work last year. So I wanted to make sure that got put in the list so everybody can pat themselves on the back and say, good job, because you guys... y'all did a great job.
But more so, I'm going to take advantage of where I'm sitting right now, and I'm going to read specifically because you're not going to give your guys enough credit. So we went through the UT change to change the text amendment to update that, which was big. Mobile food vendor, which was largely done by the city council. The HNA BLI, which is a huge project that took a very, very long time. I don't think that very many people understand or appreciate the volume of time and effort that it took by the three of you over there to go through all that, engage in all the public meetings, and do all of that work.
That's housing needs and buildable land for the folks that don't speak. State
for the audience.
Thank you. The activity center overlay zone, the River Road revitalization plan, which was another Herculean task, which I think you guys did a tremendous job with. Again, the buildable lands inventory housing needs analysis report on the housing strategies, and then looking at the shared housing, and so specifically with the ADUs. And so all of that with the three of you guys, working your tails off for a very, very long time at the leadership of Chair Whalen. And, that's a lot to accomplish in the course of 12 months. And my hat's off specifically to you guys for really good work.
And we appreciate that, but I also have to turn that around too. You guys also paid your price. We're paid, you are not. And so appreciation needs to go to you in all of your
I've been getting it.
efforts.
You didn't get your check mark?
No, I said, I've been getting my check.
It's not supposed to be a check.
We're supposed to say that there.
No, I mean, yeah.
So
Great work.
it has been good work.
And, Chair Whalen guided us through a lot of that. I know we had some meetings where we wanted to butt heads a little bit, and, with Commissioners de Blasi and Duran that were also participating in that, it was a lot of work. So personally, I'm very proud of the work we've all done, and Councilor Freeman got to sit there and listen to all of it, and she's very patient too, so that's wonderful. All right.
All right. Thank you very much.
New old business, staff report.
Before we move on.
Go.
I read in the staff report there was an opportunity for the commissioners to maybe put some ideas out
Right.
there.
Absolutely.
There's two code sections that I would like staff to look at. Specific to partition and subdivision time approvals. 3.10708A, 3.10805B and C. These codes limit the approvals of partitions and subdivisions to 1 year. Partitions, it's limited to one year extension, and subdivisions is 1 year at a time with the development director's approval.
Which is really hard to get.
That's not what I'm saying. Staff is generally
understand.
very easy to work with on those extensions, but the partitions specifically, 2 years is hard. A lot of communities in the area, they have two-year approval timelines or more with up to 5 2-year extensions. Salem's is, 4, so a total of 10 years. I would like staff to look into at least a 2-year approval with maybe 1 or 2 year extensions.
Commissioner Grants, could I ask maybe offline, shoot me an email, we can have a discussion?
Yeah.
And that would be great. I could definitely do that. I think that if everybody's kind of consensus-wise, I would want to definitely look and confer with Shannon, state statute, but I think that'd be helpful. And if you have some experience with some of the other communities specifically, I'd be happy to look at some of those things and how they line up with our code and not.
So the good news about that request is it's very discreet. And so
Yeah, I think that could go into somebody made the comment of some of the low-hanging fruit. I think that could easily be folded into another meeting where we're bringing something else. I don't think that's a very administrative kind of deal.
is that by consensus?
Definitely. Fine.
Okay. You said 2 things?
Those were the 2 things.
Oh, okay.
The two
Same kind of
the two
topic,
sections.
2 different areas. Okay.
Okay.
No problem.
I'll say that when it's brought to us, if we're out of alignment with neighboring regions for our extensions, I'd like to know just briefly what got us there in the first place, if it's possible.
Sure.
You want legislative intent on it?
Okay. Okay.
If possible. Don't go into overtime for it on my account.
No worries. I won't find any records.
Put in 1984.
Look at those budget notes.
God, don't. Okay, anything else on the work plan?
I don't know if this is the arena. I've talked with planning staff about this, and this is something I hold very dear to me, and that is the urban forestry. I don't know if this would be the time, maybe parks or something, but I know we don't have an urban forest, but that's something that would be nice to lean towards.
Commissioner Hosser, I know Nate and I have talked about that a little bit, because you and I have had those conversations, and I kind of wondered, because that actually was one of the things that on my initial draft, I was like, well, Frank has mentioned urban forestry stuff. I don't know that we necessarily felt like it was maybe the most appropriate for the planning commission and the land use side, but it might be a better venue to work with our environmental division folks. Or maybe parks, and that's something that if I could put you in contact with them and we could kind of maybe feel that out a little bit. I don't know if the Parks Advisory Board, is anybody on the Parks Advisory Board here? I thought so.
Yeah, thanks.
I don't know, honestly, I don't know.
Part-time school bus driver?
I don't know if that might be something that the Parks Advisory Board would be a good place to start with too. I know we do have an arboretum in the one park.
Well, I can switch hats and speak to that generally. We're going to be going through a Parks Master Plan in the next year and a half, I think starting in the next fiscal year. And so as that master plan gets opened up, that's certainly something to bring in and have a discussion. There are natural areas, there are specific areas within the urban growth boundary where there could be that largely. And you can do it in developed or undeveloped parks, but once you start doing it in developed parks, you reduce opportunities, but you could also increase opportunities depending on your point of view. So that would certainly be a good place to look at it. Mark and I, on the Watershed Council, we do plant a lot of trees. Rotary just last year, 90 trees?
Well, the Arboretum has 86 trees in there that we recommend, plus another 17, so about 100 trees there.
So, if you're going to take a more city approach towards it, specifically looking at areas within the UGB, my thought would be bring it up with the Parks Master Plan. And correct me if I'm wrong, but.
And I am just a little unfamiliar with exactly the concept that you are suggesting. I don't know I do know that if we're talking about creating an urban forestry kind of staffed program, that is going to be a very tough sell because of our limited resources here in the city. But so I'm not sure. I think I would urge you to put some more definition to what it is you're thinking you want to pursue. If it's simply a matter of encouraging the parks to be aware of certain aspects or something, that I think could be folded into the Parks Master Plan. I just would ask you to put a little more definition to what it is your concept you want to pursue.
Well, then you have the area of Keizer Rapids Park that we lease for in perpetuity from the state that's undeveloped forest.
And under a conservation easement.
And under conservation easement.
Yeah. But
That's the reason for 24 acres of poison oak.
So it's actually interesting, I was just Googling it because I didn't necessarily know what it was. The city of Albany has an urban forestry plan.
A lot of cities do, a lot of bigger cities do. A lot of times their streetscaping and street trees are handled through actual people who are forestry trained. And that's where, my suggestion would be, honestly, my suggestion, Frank, would be to talk to the environmental division folks. A lot of times forestry programs are tied to stormwater programs because of what trees do for treatment and all of those good things. I think that the issue becomes, and our concern is from a regulatory arm, I don't think we have the existing infrastructure in place to make it happen. So, I think that it might just make more sense to approach it through those other avenues. Now, very well, if something caught traction either in the Parks Department or through environmental, and then there was some ordinance changes or things like that, then it might be that some of those elements were to be folded into some development code provisions.
But I wouldn't think they would start here.
That's what I kind of think too. I know, yes, sir.
Having had the opportunity to deal with Salem and their urban forester, that is through their parks department. It's under Public Works and a subsidiary is Parks, and that's where they reside.
I have one more.
Okay.
And as Gary and I talked about this when we met for coffee a while ago, and that is, I know a number of cities, Seattle, I think San Antonio, that they're embracing offsetting, utilizing fossil fuels such as natural gas and propane for heat or energy. I don't know if that's something that would take foot or if this is the right arena, but that's something I think that we could, or I could, or we could look into and say, okay, this is our part, this is our role in offsetting the earth from heating up.
Well, I think the issue is a highly politically charged issue. I guess I would look to the rest of the rest of the commission to try to, do you have a temperament to get involved in the climate change dialogue and the carbon offset kinds of dialogues in order to, do we want to pursue that as a project? I don't want to influence the commission. Certainly, you guys are in charge, but I can tell you that going back to the bandwidth analogy is there are only so many things that we are going to be able to get accomplished in our very small planning staff. I don't know of a city anywhere near our size that has the small planning staff that we do. And for us to get involved with that would take, I think, outside resources, flat out. It would take somebody else that would have to bring in here. And I just don't know if we have even the resources to pursue the outside resources for that large concept discussion.
Well, it sounds like a lot of that would probably start in the environmental anyways, right? I mean, if we're going to kind of look down that path, I don't know.
Well, it depends what aspect you're talking about. If you're talking about putting development restrictions on housing types or that sort of thing, you
Or
know.
development incentives too. I think I can't remember where it was. I thought I just read an article that talked about new house builds having to utilize solar.
Right.
I can't remember where that was at. I think it's somewhere in Oregon though. So I mean, so there are some things like that we could consider. I would say that would be something that maybe fleshing out a little more detail on where you're wanting to approach that, and then have that. Yeah, go ahead.
Wind.
Okay.
The homeowner could buy or purchase for lack of a better word, a wind turbine. The question or the code would be, how high could that individual go?
Sure.
Because I know that Salem has approached that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that by looking into that, promoting that
Okay.
in electricity, and what I mean is, I've worked in HVAC before, you know, and they promote these, they're tax write-offs when you start installing these units.
Okay.
And so they promote natural gas or propane.
Sure.
See
Sure.
what I'm saying? And so that's what I mean by promoting electricity rather than.
Right. And I think that the tax write-offs and the financial implication, I don't think that's something that we could do here, but the one thing I could totally, if you wanted to talk with me offline,
Okay.
shoot me an email, kind of like maybe Jeremy and I will do too.
Sure.
Right now, we do have some very specific language in our code, in our exemptions section for things that are deemed as aerials, solar equipment, things like that. So what we could do is if there's some specific concepts that you're talking about that our code doesn't already capture, or that we might want to consider, that would in a roundabout way, I wouldn't say it would incentivize it, I would say it would maybe remove a barrier to that type of alternate energy use. That might be something that would be appropriate to live in the development code. It might be, again, sort of a one-off, talk about it and see. I mean, I think that the bigger issue and where I would be concerned, and I think Nate's expressed it pretty well, I don't think that it's going to be one where we're going to be able to go with the really large picture issue of trying to move that needle greatly. But I think from an administrative piece, I'm happy to look into that and work with you on showing what we have right now. So kind of give you a little more guidance.
Yeah, I think putting allowances in code is pretty easy to look out. Putting requirements would be
That's much-
real close to a non-starter at this point in this community, I think. Personal, I'm for it, but I think talking about offsets in Keizer would be a really large conversation that wouldn't start at the Planning Commission. I think it'd start in the Keizer Times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Coach Keller.
You know, this topic and both things, quite frankly, that have been brought up about urban forestry. To me, I look towards what the city council has for their goals. And these are huge, to me, are huge topics, and they're huge potential resource eaters. They're politically charged. And although we have independence as the planning commission, I always look to what the council wants to accomplish over the next year or two or three, and let that be the guide of where we're going. There's one thing to be talking about dealing with specific planning ordinances and changes and things, but basically starting up all new possible programs and all those kinds of things where ideas are interesting to discuss. I don't think it's within our purview to spend our community's time plowing through that kind of stuff without some direction from the council.
I can say, as Shane promised, and Shane had to leave, so you're stuck with me for the rest of the meeting, but I think it would be an easy thing to look at the existing barriers that perhaps would prevent somebody to have the option to do something like that. And so I would encourage you, Commissioner Hostler, to identify specific issues that you want to identify. And we can certainly look at the code and say, well, the height requirement of an antenna would be whatever. That we can do without doing a planning commission project on. So let's start there and look at where the code may have some barriers that we could look at changing on a very specific basis. So if you'll work with Shane on that, that'd be fine.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Staff report, please. New or old business?
Okay, new or old business. Well, as you know, council chose to change the threshold on the ADU. You're all aware of that, I'm assuming. So they basically had several concerns, and if we want to explore them, Councilor Freeman is here, but basically it's the relationship of an accessory unit to the main structure is something that they felt strongly about and needed to be clearer that the accessory unit is subordinate to the main house. And without going through a lot of gyrations and some creative algebra that a permit application would have to go through, basically they chose to just simply have a maximum cap. Not a percentage, but just a maximum cap. It was straightforward, and it was their policy decision to do that. I don't know if you want to add anything.
That's perfect.
The other thing that I did want to share with you is kind of an interesting thing that came out of the blue is we had a meeting with the Marion County Economic Development team. I guess, I'm not exactly sure. I don't think it's a department. I don't know, I'm not sure where it lives. But the county has decided, Marion County commissioners have decided that in order to foster economic development, that they are going to grant each incorporated city $15,000 for 3 years, which can be aggregated for very general economic development purposes. It's not a lot of money. And it's an interesting, their decision was each city gets exactly the same amount. So Salem gets the same amount as we do, as does Mill City.
I mean, good for them.
I know, right? My first reaction was, oh, what am I going to do with $15,000? But
45,000.
but it is actually 45,000 because it can be aggregated. So we are going through the list. We actually have to do an IGA with the county to be able to accept this money.
It's an intergovernmental agreement.
Intergovernmental agreement, sorry. And so that is going to be on the council agenda at their next meeting.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Employment lands opportunity.
Employment lands, yeah, that's a good grant for that.
Well,
Employment lands or,
there have been several things suggested. So I think what I'll do, I am going to share it with the council. I'm also going to share it with you. It includes everything like prepping the land that's north of the stadium, to hiring a consultant for employment land establishment. We're going to create a list of things that we know about and have identified already in our various plans and discussions. And if you get another idea, by all means, put it on the list. But so it's something that came out of the blue, and it's certainly not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. And no, I will not be buying lottery tickets or. Anyway, so I thought you should be aware of that, and that is something that just fell out of the sky in our laps, and we're going to make the best we can out of it. So with that, I don't think anything else to add to that liaison or the staff report.
All right. Councilor Freeman, what have you got for us this evening?
Well, it's been a busy week. We had started Monday with City Council, and for those of you that attended, thank you. But our biggest agenda item was adding some teeth, for better lack of words, to our camping ordinance. And so just to be clear, this ordinance, the City of Keizer had an ordinance. We just added some strength to it. It was not new like the City of Salem. So I think that's the biggest thing I want to make sure everyone knows. This Monday night, so that's the 13th, we have our work session, and we're going to be talking about city goals. So everyone's welcome. Last night we had our charter review committee, and I'm just going to give a shout out to Shannon and the committee members. Mr. Whalen happens to be one of them. They're doing amazing work. Shannon's really keeping us on task, and I probably put a little pressure on last night to kind of make us have a little longer meetings, which I know is not always pleasurable, but I really want to make sure that we have time for some really good community engagement after we come up with a draft for the, proposed, recommendations for citizen input. So from the conversation Monday night on, the homeless issue, I am working with the chamber. Councilor Smith and I will be working with the chamber, Jonathan and Danielle, to put the next community conversation together. It probably will be early spring, and it will be probably a panel discussion. When they had one before, they had, I believe it was Allie, who works with the homeless initiative. And it was just talked about numbers, and everyone I've talked to says, please don't talk numbers. Please let's bring people to the table and actually talk solutions. So if you have thoughts of what you'd like to, have a panel discussion on or things, please let me know, because we'll be meeting probably within the next month or two. Just another thing in reference to homelessness, every year at the end of January, there is what's called a point-in-time count, and it's administered by Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, which if you were here Monday night, Jimmy Jones is the executive director for that. But why this is so critical is they are trying to find and count homeless people, because that's how our region and most communities get federal resources in to help with homeless and many other things. And so they always look for volunteers. So I would encourage you, if you have the opportunity to participate in that event, it's pretty humbling and Keizer does have 43 homeless camps, according to the chief. Most of them are not truly camps. Thank you to our police department and our code enforcement, but just look for that, and I'm going to get that information and share with Tracy, and once I have it, I'll make an announcement too at the next council meeting. Tomorrow night is the West Keizer Neighborhood Association meeting, and it is their election of officers, and I know Gubser is back on track to meet too, right, Mark? Yeah.
And it's also the election of their officers.
Okay, so it is that time of year, and then on January 18th is the First Citizen Banquet, which is a nice event located here at City Hall and honors several people within our community. So that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I will be available on the 21st to do the very nice presentation of the work. I don't necessarily need to present the work plan, just tell the council that we've done it, okay?
Well, I'm going to share it with them,
Okay,
so I don't think you have to read it.
okay. So it'll be a very brief commission update to the council, so. Unless there's anything else for the good of the order, we'll stand adjourned at 7:40. Thanks for everybody's help tonight. Thanks, team.
Okay?